Greetings, this is Gary Miranda once again with another episode of Wake the Happy Words. Today I'm going to do something a little different. That is, I'm going to share some poems by other poets, poems that are either favorites of mine or that I consider among the best poems in their class. The first of these is, in my opinion, one of the most perfect poems in the language, though I suspect my choice of it will be a little surprising, or at least would have been if you hadn't seen it in the episode listing. It's a poem by a British writer named Leigh Hunt, who was a Romantic poet, though not one of the better known of the Romantic poets. The Romantics are a contrary lot. The most prolific of the bunch, of which Hunt was one, are little remembered. For example, Robert Southey, who attempted and actually completed several epics. Lord Byron said of Southey's epics, "They will be remembered when Homer and Virgil are forgotten, and not until then," which is pretty much the case. As for Leigh Hunt, he wrote poems in every imaginable form, as well as translations from the Greek, Roman, Italian, and French, and yet is remembered, if he's remembered at all, for an 8-line poem that was originally titled simply Rondeau, but which is known and loved by many, including myself, as Jenny Kissed Me. The Jenny in the poem is Jane Welsh Carlyle, the wife of historian Thomas Carlyle. There are several versions of the occasion that inspired the poem, but the most reliable is that Hunt, a regular visit to the Carlyle household, had been ill for some time during a flu epidemic, and on recovering made a surprise visit to the Carlyles. Jane, or Jenny, who was known for her beauty, wit, and spontaneity, was so delighted to see him that she could hardly contain herself. I find it one of the most charming and, as I said, most perfect poems in English. Every word, every syllable contributes to the effect. Jenny Kissed Me by Leigh Hunt. Jenny kissed me when we met, jumping from the chair she sat in. "Time, you thief, who love to get sweets into your list, put that in. Say I'm weary, say I'm sad, say that health and wealth have missed me. Say I'm growing old, but add, Jenny kissed me." The first poet that I ever became enamored of was A.E. Housman. As a troubled teen, I latched onto Housman until I knew most of the poems in A Shropshire Lad by heart. Housman is generally considered a pessimistic poet, and the numerous parodies of his poems accentuate that quality. For example, Housman himself considered this parody by Hugh Kingsmill to be the best of the bunch. "What, still alive at 22? A clean, upstanding chap like you? Sure, if your throat is hard to slit, slit your girls and swing for it. Like enough you won't be glad when they come to hang you, lad, but bacon's not the only thing that's cured by hanging from a string." All that said, no one does what Housman does, namely variations on the ballad stanza, better than Housman. No one even comes close. The variety of inflection he gets into the 4-foot iambic line, and his ability to make it sound like casual speech rather than "Mary had a little lamb," is little short of astounding. If you don't believe me, try it sometime. The poem I'm going to read, Terence, This Is Stupid Stuff, also plays off of Housman's reputation for negativity. Housman's first book, A Shropshire Lad, was going to be called The Collected Poems of Terence Hearsay. And in the following poem, a reader is complaining to Terence that the poems are all downers. Housman, however, has the last word. Housman was a classicist, and the poem is divided into 3 parts of the classical ode: a strophe, essentially the introduction, and antistrophe, which presents a response or contrasting idea, and an epode, or conclusion. The strophe in this case is the reader complaining to Terence. The antistrophe is Terence's reply to the complaint, and the epode, beginning with "There was a king reigned in the East," is a story illustrating Terence's justification of his poems. Finally, you don't want to miss the reference to Milton, who said that he wrote Paradise Lost to justify God's ways to man. Enough. Here is the poem. Terence, This is Stupid Stuff, by A.E. Housman. Terence, this is stupid stuff. You eat your victuals fast enough. There can't be much amiss, 'tis clear, to see the rate you drink your beer. But oh, good Lord, the verse you make, it gives a chap the bellyache. The cow, the old cow, she is dead. It sleeps well, the horned head. We, poor lad, 'tis our turn now to hear such tunes as killed the cow. Pretty friendship 'tis to rhyme your friends to death before their time, moping, melancholy, mad. Come, pipe a tune to dance to, lad. Why, if 'tis dancing you would be, there's brisker pipes than poetry. Say, for what were hop yards meant, or why was Burton built on Trent? Oh, many a peer of England brews livelier liquor than the Muse, and malt does more than Milton can to justify God's ways to man. Ale, man, ale's the stuff to drink for fellows whom it hurts to think. Look into the pewter pot to see the world as the world's not, and faith, 'tis pleasant till 'tis past. The mischief is that 'twill not last. Oh, I have been to Ludlow Fair, and left my necktie God knows where, and carried halfway home or near pints and quarts of Ludlow beer. Then the world seemed none so bad, and I myself a sterling lad, and down in lovely muck I've lain, happy till I woke again. Then I saw the morning sky. Oh, the tale was all a lie. The world, it was the old world yet. I was I, my things were wet, and nothing now remained to do but begin the game anew. Therefore, since the world has still much good, but much less good than ill, and while the sun and moon endure, luck's a chance, but trouble's sure, I'd face it as a wise man would, and train for ill and not for good. 'Tis true, the stuff I bring for sale is not so brisk a brew as ale. Out of a stem that scored the hand, I wrung it in a weary land. But take it. If the smack is sour, the better for the embittered hour. It should do good to heart and head when your soul is in my soul's stead, and I will friend you, if I may, in the dark and cloudy day. There was a king reigned in the East. There, when kings will sit to feast, they took their fill before they think, with poisoned meat and poisoned drink. He gathered all that springs to birth from the many venomed earth. First a little, thence to more, he sampled all her killing store, and easy, smiling, seasoned sound sate the king when health went round. They put arsenic in his meat, and stared aghast to watch him eat. They poured strychnine in his cup, and shook to see him drink it up. They shook, they stared as white's their shirt. Them it was their poison hurt. I tell the tale that I heard told. Mithridates, he died old. I had the good fortune to be chosen by the Atlantic Monthly to be the poet in residence at Robert Frost's house in Franconia, New Hampshire. The upper portion of the house was open to visitors, and I spent a good deal of my summer there, sitting on the porch trying to look like Robert Frost, which isn't easy when you're bald. In any case, this next poem, as they say, needs no introduction. Birches by Robert Frost. I don't think it's a coincidence that Frost, like Hausmann, was well versed in and influenced by Latin and Greek poetry. What Hausmann did with the 4-foot line, Frost does with the traditional iambic pentameter or blank verse. Namely, takes the most used up line in the language and makes it sound like casual speech, and his own casual speech at that. In Birches, for example, the first 4 lines are straight iambic pentameter without a single substitution. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. Yet sound as colloquial as someone talking to you across a back fence. I can't think of a poem that I more enjoy reading aloud. Birches by Robert Frost. When I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay, as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them, loaded with ice, a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises, and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when Truth broke in with all her matter-of-fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them, as he went out and in to fetch the cows, some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one he subdued his father's trees by writing them down over and over again, until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp, not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim, and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first, with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations, and life is too much like a pathless wood where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate wilfully misunderstand me, and half grant what I wish, and snatch me away not to return. Earth's the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree, and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. If I were granted a wish to have written only one poem in the language, I would choose Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. It's always been my benchmark, not only for its lyrical sweep, but for the worldview it expresses, namely affirmation in the face of insurmountable odds. The one time I showed a poem of mine to the creative writing class at UC Irvine, the poet in residence said, "You can't do that in poetry." I was inclined to point out that I had already done it, but I let it pass. What you could do in that class was write poems that were long on cryptic or surreal images and short on declarative statements. Fortunately, I was already set enough in my ways to know that that wasn't what I wanted to do. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to write Dover Beach. Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window. Sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land, listen. You hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once, too, at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind, down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. There are many ways to rank a poet's strengths, only one of which would be the number of great poems that he or she has written. By that standard, Robert Frost is perhaps our greatest. But if I were to rank poets by originality, I'd give the nod to Emily Dickinson. For sheer guts, to Walt Whitman. But there are also poets who might have fewer good or great poems, but whose overall accomplishment is significant. Fellow Oregonian William Stafford is such a poet. When a new book of Bill's came out, I would buy it without a second thought, knowing that there would be more than enough honesty and wisdom to justify the purchase. But I can't think of a single poem of Bill's that I would rank with those of any of the poets I just mentioned. With Stafford, what resonates as much as any individual poem is the accumulative effect of the poems, and what this reveals about the persona behind the words. And it was a persona. I didn't really appreciate Stafford until I heard him read. I had been reading him too fast. The Kansas drawl was part of the persona. I remember at a reading, somebody in the audience asked Bill why he didn't have more rhymes in his poetry. He replied, "Well, I think all words rhyme, sort of. I mean, any syllable sounds more like any other syllable than it sounds like silence." That was Bill in a nutshell. Lower your standards. In any case, I'm concluding this episode of Other Voices with a poem of Bill's that has always been a favorite of mine. Religion Back Home by William Stafford. 1. When God's parachute failed, about the spring of 1945, the sky in Texas jerked open, and we all sailed easily into this new strange harness on the stars. 2. The minister smoked, and he drank, and there was that woman in the choir. But what really finished him, he wore spats. 3. A short review of Samson Agonistes written for Miss Arrington's class in Liberal High School. Our Father, who art in heaven, can lick their Father, who art in heaven. 4. When my little brother chanted in 1492, Jesus crossed the ocean blue, Mother said, "Bob, you mean Columbus crossed the ocean blue." And he said, "I always did get them two guys mixed up." Once again, thanks for listening. Until next time, this is Gary Miranda saying with Theodore Rethke, wake the happy words.